Perfect. All right, so welcome everyone. So tonight's presentation is going to be on maximizing our nutrition. And feel free for those who are listening online, if you need to ask any questions throughout, just unmute your mics and ask the question. I'm not able to see any type of questions that are typed in a chat box at this point. So if you need to ask a question, or if you want to ask a question, just feel free to unmute your mics and ask. So a little bit about myself. So my name is Lee Urkis. I'm a dietitian here at Bellin. I've been doing this type of work for about 10 years now. I see a variety of different clientele throughout the week. I do some general nutrition counseling. I also specialize more on the diabetes side of things and on the sports and wellness side is the equation as well. So if you have any questions after tonight, or if you want to reach out for an appointment or a session, feel free to contact me either by phone or by email. I'm always open for questions if you have any. So jumping into tonight's topic. So we're going to start off by talking about like habit change and habit building, because that's a lot of what nutrition and lifestyle is about, is building habits or trying to replace habits. So this is a really nice quote that I found a while back, basically showing us that we're not going to throw a habit out overnight. It takes some time to really coax that habit down the steps and to replace that new habit and coax it up the steps over time. So just kind of have some grace with yourself when you are trying to change nutrition habits or any type of habit. It's going to take a little bit of time, and that's okay. Try to enjoy the process at least a little bit. It'll be worth it in the end. So one thing I bring up when we're talking about building new habits is the intention and behavior gap. And that's really the gap between what our intention is and where we're currently at. So for instance, if we want to cook dinner, let's say 5 nights a week at home, that's our intention. But maybe our current behavior is that we're eating out 6 days per week. That's a pretty big gap. At least when I look at that, that'd be a pretty big gap. So what might be more beneficial is to take that gap and see how can we bring that down so it's a smaller gap for us to close. So maybe a goal would be setting up like, let's try to cook at home 2 nights out of the week. Again, knowing that that's a little bit more realistic if currently we're eating out 6 nights, just to help bring that gap a little bit closer together. And once you hit 2 nights, then you can increase it to 3 or 4 nights, and that bigger gap will eventually close up over time. But this is how I view most of your goals you set up in life, is kind of see where the intention is and where your current behavior is and build those gaps a little bit smaller so that we can close them up. The other thing I encourage clients to do is chain up your habits together. So if you're trying to start a new habit, find an old habit that you currently have and chain the new habit to that old habit. So for instance, if you're trying to move more during the day, maybe you like to watch a Netflix show every day or something along that lines. Maybe during part of that show, you'll chain up that movement habit to it. So every time I watch this show for 10 minutes, I'm going to hop on my exercise bike, or I'm going to walk in place while I watch the first 10 minutes. So when you chain up those habits together, you're much more likely to act on that new habit. Because it's really hard to say, I'm going to start this habit, but if there's no action point to it, it's really easy to say, well, there's tomorrow, there's the next day, there's next week, and we all can fall into that. So I really do encourage most of my clients to figure out something we can chain it to that it'll make them more triggered to act on it consistently. And again, you can apply that to many different types of habits that you're trying to build. It's not just nutrition related or exercise related. It can be across the board. And then activation energy. So this is the amount of energy it actually takes to act on that new habit we're trying to build. So the goal here could be both sides. So we might be trying to either make the activation energy larger. So if we're trying to break a habit, we want to make that energy a lot higher to act on it. So for instance, let's say we're trying to get out of the habit of snacking on this type of food after dinner. Then we'll want to try to make sure that to get to that food, it takes more energy to do that. So whether we put it like up in a cabinet where then we have to grab a chair out and get up into the cabinet, or maybe we leave it at the store. So then that takes even more energy. I have to get the car and go down to the store and get it. So that builds that activation energy. So we just can, again, push a button really quickly in our brain and act on that habit right away. And in reverse, if you're trying to build a new habit, let's say for instance, if you're trying to add a new type of food into your meal plan consistently, number one, we want to have that food really accessible. So right in your fridge or on the counter more often. That way, when you're wanting to act on that, it's right there and you can do it immediately. That'll help build those kind of synapses a little bit easier in the brain so that you do act on that habit more frequently. So again, you want to look at this both ways, whether you're trying to break habits or build new habits. And I do think the activation energy can really make a difference when you are trying to break those old habits and then try to bring in those new habits. Has anyone had any tips or tricks along the way when they're trying to build habits at this point? Any chaining of habits together or things you've done that seem to have worked well to build those habits a little bit easier?
No, but I think I remember being a gentleman who talked about, I think he called them sticky habits. He would do 2 push-ups whenever he'd go to the washroom. Yeah.
Yeah, so again, kind of sticky habits, I like that too. So basically chained it up to something else and probably over time was able to get stronger that way. And it feels like, again, you're accomplishing something, which can be a way to then springboard off it to something else. So I like that, sticky habits. So now that we've went through kind of like how do we build and break habits overall, or some of at least the concepts behind it, now we're going to transition into kind of talking about food swaps and just more optimizing our food choices throughout a day or week. And number one would be optimizing your shopping list. And that might be the habit that we're trying to start is making a list. We do know that people, when they make a list, they tend to not purchase as many of the kind of impulse items, which are often, I call them the fun foods. So most impulse foods are usually going to be like the candies, the sweets, something that we wouldn't normally buy, unless again, it's something like we see that on the end cap when we're checking out. So by building a shopping list, that can sometimes keep your mind a little bit more focused and maybe a little bit off some of those more fun food items. Not that we can't have them. It's just, we don't want those to overtake our more nutrient-rich foods. So this shopping list, you will have these slides. We will get these out. That way you'll have them as a reference point and you can use this as a guide to maybe help build your own list. And this is not the be all end all list that Lee made up and now, oh my goodness, we have to eat just what Lee has on this list. It's a start. And hopefully you can even pull a few new food items off this list to say, oh yeah, I haven't tried that before. Or maybe I can swap this food in for that one on my shopping list. And again, for shopping lists, you can either do pen or paper or like there's tons of apps out there as well that you could utilize to kind of make a running list to keep on your phone. So now for those of you who are listening tonight and you're just like, okay, Lee, give me the one slide that'll help improve my health and then I can tune you out for a little bit here for a bit of time. So this is the one slide I like to put in to say, even if you take this slide away and you start acting on it, you'll likely have better health after 6 months of doing it more consistently. So some of the big ticket items here, number one are going to be trying to incorporate some type of berry or cherry in your meal plan more consistently. Almost all the research behind berries and cherries are positive, whether it's cholesterol reduction, brain health, a diabetes reduction. So if you can even implement that on a consistent basis, you're likely going to see your health markers improve after 6 months or so. And I know some of you will be saying, well, Lee, that's not easy to do during the winter times in this area because of the availability. I would encourage you to go to more frozen in the winter. They're just as good nutritionally as fresh. And you can use them in smoothies. You could make smoothie bowls out of them. Some people just will let it thaw out and then eat it that way, like mixed into yogurt. So frozen is probably going to be a better route to go, or when you can get fresh at a reasonable price, still go that route as well. Next up to bat are nuts and seeds. So we do know that any type of nut or seed, like sunflower seeds, almonds, pistachios, walnuts, they all have health benefits. I often encourage clients to think of variety as better in that area. Don't feel like one is better than the other. Variety is the big ticket item when it comes to nuts and seeds and berries, things like this. So whether you throw like some nuts and seeds into a trail mix and have that for a snack through a day, some people like to put it into yogurts or oatmeal just to add some crunch. Salads could be another way to make them a little bit more appealing. So the big ticket item when it comes to nuts and seeds are that you do have to watch your portion because it is easy to overeat on them because they're tasty. So you do want to keep it to around a small handful or about a quarter cup if you're measuring them. That way it'll still have the health benefit without maybe leading to excess weight gain that you're not wanting. So just know that we don't want to go to the couch with our nut container and eat half a container in a sitting. Trust me, I've been there, so I talk from experience. You definitely want to keep it in the kitchen, take it in a bowl, and then go out to the place where you sit and maybe watch something. Next up to bat is going to be fermented foods, which some people really enjoy these types of foods and some people it's acquired taste. So fermented foods, for most of us, probably think of maybe like yogurts. Kefir is a drinkable type of yogurt, has a little bit more tartness to it, but there are a lot of probiotics in it, so that healthy gut bacteria. So fermented foods help nourish our gut, basically. So if you're not into eating fermented foods, it might be something to explore even on a weekly basis. So maybe adding in some yogurts here and there, or kimchi, that could be another nice option as like a condiment. It's spicy cabbage, basically, that's how I describe it. And it's an acquired taste. The first time you might say, yeah, that's okay. And the more you try it, I think that's when your taste buds kind of adjust to these types of foods. Sourdough bread would fall into this as well. So for more of that fermented food style. So I would just explore this area because we do see that there are some gut health benefits to this long term, for those of us who eat more of it. And then last but not least, which I'm sure you've heard of this kind of recommendation, are fish and seafood. We should probably swap out some of our more four-legged animals to more of the no-legged animals. So fish and seafood would fall into that category for the most part. And it doesn't mean you have to eat every meal, fish or seafood, but even like a couple times per week. And I have to bring this up. Unfortunately, the perch fish fry on Friday nights doesn't count towards this, but again, everything in moderation, everything in balance. So this would be more non-fried fish and seafood or non-breaded type of fish and seafood that we'd be aiming for. Hey, welcome. Come on in. So this would really be kind of the wrap up from this slide. If we can get some berries and cherries in more frequently throughout the week and even daily, we're going to be on a good path. Adding in like a serving of nuts every day, so about a quarter cup. Maybe experimenting with some fermented foods, and then last but not least, getting some fish and seafood in more frequently. That would really have some big health benefits if we can do that on a consistent basis. So I know that it's great if you do it one day, but let's try to string as many days together where you're doing some of these kind of habits and chain them up maybe together. That might help us get these in more consistently as well. So foods that provide fullness. So how many of us struggle sometimes with staying full throughout the day or feeling maybe hungry more frequently throughout the day? Yeah, it could definitely happen to most of us. But what we're finding now is there's some research going on where they have found that there's certain foods that promote more fullness after we eat them. They call it the satiety index, which is just a fancy name for fullness. So I pulled out some of the highest ones from that study, showing us that maybe if we're not eating a lot of these really high satiety foods, that might be the reason why we're feeling hungry a lot more often. And so as you can see on here, there's a lot of plant-based foods on this list. So fruits and vegetables are definitely in this category, but some of the big ones, so oatmeal definitely can fall into this category. Potatoes, which sometimes they get a bad rap. So I know I've heard a lot about potatoes in my 10 years of doing this. And really at the end of the day, most of the evidence comes back as positives for like a positive correlation with potatoes and health. So the unfortunate part is, what do you think are the most frequent potatoes that we consume on a weekly basis in this kind of culture? French fries, potato chips. Those are the heavy potato consumption. So the things on this slide here would be more like baked potatoes, like homemade mashed potatoes, things that are, again, more homemade and whole in nature, not less of the processed versions of those. So that's kind of the key takeaway. A lot of the foods listed here, there are a lot of wholesome foods that, again, take a little bit more time to digest, and that's what keeps us full longer. The other ones that I like to pull up are more breads. So the breads that they're kind of mentioning on this slide would be more like sprouted grain breads, which some of you might have heard of those before. They're often in the freezer section of the grocery store. So they just take a little bit longer to digest and they keep us full a bit longer. They have more nutrients in general as well. Another one I tend to bring up is Dave's Killer Bread. It's just a little bit more grainy in nature. It's easier to find now at most grocery stores. So you just want to be a bit more choosy when you're doing more of those like man-made bread products in general. Because sometimes if you're eating the other types of breads, you might eat the sandwich and an hour later might feel more hungry from that, just the way it digests in our system. So I just tend to utilize this slide as a way to say, hey, if we're feeling really hungry after a lot of our meals, let's try to push in some of these high fullness foods to see if it can help at least curb some of that hunger by our next meal. And beans and lentils, I have to bring those up. If you can fit in any beans and lentils in your plan throughout a week, that's another way to promote some fullness and to even help reduce cholesterol. Bless you. And then the swap. So this is one of my favorite slides. It just kind of helps us take some of the foods we might traditionally be eating and start swapping them over to the more nutrient dense foods. So by all means, I don't want you to look at this slide and be like, well, Lee told me I have to take everything on the left hand of this slide and swap it over. That's not how nutrition works or how even like health works. Basically what we find is that if people can even make one or two swaps consistently, there's health benefits that are generated from that. So I always encourage my clients, let's take a look at this and see what you're doing most on this left-hand side, and let's see what's most reasonable to switch over to and what you think you could do consistently for a while. Like for instance, maybe it's the alcohol. Maybe we're switching from whatever mixed drink we're doing over to wine. I'm not gonna say that that's like the most health promoting swap, but it certainly would probably give you a little bit more nutrition than say like an old fashioned. I know I'll probably take some heat for dissing old fashions, but I'm sorry. There's not as much nutrition in those as there is in red wine. And sometimes I even joke about this slide. The one swap you can't do just on its own. You can't just swap the alcohol over to wine. You have to pick something else too. So another one on here that I tend to kind of look at a bit more would be cold breakfast cereal, just because it is quick and easy. Unfortunately, it is one of those highly processed food items, and it doesn't have as much nutrition as it's sometimes touted to have. So I would say if you can even swap sometimes more of the cold cereal over to the hot cereals, that can make a big difference long-term on your health. But really, again, taking away this slide and just saying, okay, what are one or two items that I could swap over to this more right-hand side to make it more nutrient rich? And we brought up like potato chips already. So maybe that's the time we swap those over to the more nuts and seeds as a way to get the crunch. And even if you do salted nuts or seeds, it's still going to be a good swap over from the salted potato chips. So there's no perfect food item. That's what I always like to get across to. Every swap that you're doing more towards whole foods or real foods, it's going to be a decent swap for your health. And small changes add up. This is where a lot of my clients sometimes focus on too much of the big long-term goal, and we forget about the short-term impacts that little things can really add up in a big way. So for instance, let's say if we're doing a lot of the flavored coffee drinks throughout a week, like I call them the food coffees, because they're fun and they do taste really good, but they add up. So let's say you were doing them daily and you took 3 of those out of your meal plan in a week, it would have a big impact. So over a month, you'd shave off about 8,000 calories out of your meal plan in a month if you shave 3 of them out per week. And then in a year, you would save about 96,000 calories a year. So really, anytime you do any nutrition changes, you want to think about over the course of a week or month, how much does that change what I'm doing? Because it can make a huge difference. It'd be the same for soda. Even if you shaved off like 1 soda per day, that's 7 per week that you're shaving off. And that'll make a difference if you can continually do that over time. So that's the one thing you're going to hear a broken record here tonight is that whatever we decide to do change-wise or habit-wise, we want to try to build it consistently. So that way we get the bigger outcomes, that compounding interest factor basically out of your habit. And now transitioning more to like going through some of the other food groups. So protein rich foods. So this is one area that I get a lot of questions about. I know we've probably heard about more like plant-based eating and more vegetarian-based diets. And there's, again, the research does support that we probably do need to have more plant-based proteins in our meal plan on a week-to-week basis. So this slide is kind of helping us divide them out. So we have more of our animal meats on the left-hand side here, and it is okay to have animal meats in your meal plan as long as you tolerate them. The biggest things would be choosing the leaner types. So if you can go to more skinless meats, that would be better. For like ground meats, trying to pick at least like 90-10. So it's 90% lean and only 10% fat. That would be a way just to, again, make it a little bit healthier for us long term. We already brought up fish and seafood, so trying to swap more of those into the mix a bit more often. And then going over to the meat alternatives a bit more. So again, maybe the nuts and seeds, the beans and lentils could fall into place there. Edamame could be another one to add in, which are just little green soybeans for those of us who haven't had those before. Tofu, that's a tough sell, but if you know how to cook it, it's okay. It actually, the texture's a little different, but it just takes on the flavor of whatever you've marinated in. So tofu can be a more, definitely an inexpensive way to get some high quality protein in. That's the one bonus to the plant-based side. It usually is cheaper than meat. So if you're trying to balance a budget for a family, that is a good way to go just to help keep the budget down a bit more. And then the fun proteins, which I have to bring up. This is the group we probably should be more focused on. So think of like bacon, sausage, pepperoni, all the fun meats that when we have them, yeah, they taste good. They're usually part of maybe like get-togethers, events. But oftentimes I have individuals that eat those as a staple meat, which that's really not how we should view those food items. They're a fun option that, hey, throw them in the mix maybe once or twice a week, or however it fits into your balanced meal plan. But if those are becoming like a staple every single day or frequently throughout the week, that's when we're probably gonna see some health issues maybe crop up from that for time. So I always encourage my clients to think about when we hear about like blog articles or things like that, talking about how red meat or animal meats are bad, we have to distinguish about what we're eating. Because a lot of times they group in the fun meats with the animal meats, and there's a difference there health wise. So just know if you're swapping some of your animal meats over to the whole stuff, the more real animal meats that haven't been highly processed, you're probably still on a pretty good path for health, especially if we balance it with some of the plant-based items too. And does anyone know how much protein we need in a day? How many grams of protein? A lot. Yeah, good answer. It varies. So it depends on how active you are, but a good starting point would be at least half your body weight in grams of protein. So let's say you weighed 140 pounds. You'd want about 70 grams of protein a day at the minimum. If you're really active, say you're doing a lot of training of some type, or if you're weightlifting, you might need up to a gram per pound of your body weight. Again, that's if you're really active and you're doing a lot of weight resistance type workouts. So again, it could be a half pound up to a pound would be kind of that capping point for a lot of individuals probably listening tonight. But if you feel like you're under that 0.5, so if you don't feel like you're getting in at least half your body weight, that could be another reason why you're feeling more hungry often. And we even find too, for sometimes females, they might lose muscle a bit easier as they age if their protein intake is too low. So another reason we want to try to keep this at least to that minimum level for long-term health. And for bone health, for a long time, there used to be like kind of things that were said that were like, okay, if you eat too much protein, it hurts your bone health. It's actually the reverse. If you don't eat enough protein, you actually lose bone easier than the individuals who eat enough protein. A lot of it comes down to the quality of protein. So again, getting back to more of the whole food protein and maybe plant-based in the mix there as well. Or if you want to do all plant-based, that is okay. It's just, you have to take a little bit more time to figure out where you're getting that protein from the plant-based sources. So building a high protein day. So now that we know probably a lot of us need anywhere from like 70 to 100 grams of protein in a day, depending on, again, where we fall. It really can add up quick if we're eating protein at most of our meal time. So in a day, if we had maybe some eggs, some Greek yogurt, some dry roast edamame, which those are a nice crunchy kind of snack if you haven't had them before, maybe some chicken at a mealtime and half a cup of beans, just in that food alone, you'd be at 90 grams of protein in a day. And that's not including anything else you added in, because grains still have protein. So it's easy to get the protein in if you're thinking about having some with every meal and making sure that we are adding a source with our main meals especially. And then time-saving options. How many of us are on a time constraint day to day for cooking or meal prepping? Yeah, I feel like most are. So this slide is built for those of us who are still trying to, again, stay on a healthier path, but need things that are quick and time efficient. So not everyone's gonna like every single food item listed here, but there might be at least one or two that you can say, oh, I forgot about that, right? I don't utilize that enough maybe. Like for instance, like the rotisserie chicken. Those can be a quick grab that you can utilize. Like say you're coming home from work and you're like, okay, I don't want to order out again for a meal tonight. Let's at least get a rotisserie chicken and we can have some leftovers from that and make it into a casserole maybe another night. Because it's still, again, a leaner meat, especially if you take the skin off of it, it's still a pretty lean meat at the end. Other things up here, the Greek yogurt or cottage cheese cups, those can sometimes be a quick grab and go, maybe for like a breakfast or even a part of a lunch meal. For those of us who want to try veggie burgers, again, you can make your own at home, but Dr. Prager's makes a pretty good line of pre-made veggie burgers too. I will tell you, any pre-made veggie burger is going to run a bit higher in cost, so just know that that might not be the most budget-friendly item, but it is quick and easy for a meal at home, especially if you're trying to get more into plant-based foods. Other ones I like to bring up from here, because they're my favorite, are chicken tenders. So if you have kids or if you're a big kid like myself, the chicken tenders are always ones that have been hard for me to like kind of steer away from, but thankfully now companies are making them healthier. So they have lightly breaded versions. Tyson, Purdue all make a lightly breaded version. Applegate is another really high quality kind of chicken-based product that they make a more lightly breaded item. And they now are making even non-breaded nuggets too, for those of us who are even trying to steer away from any of the breading on foods. So just know there's always going to be a happy medium out there to find. It's just trying to take the time to find it. And then last but not least, another one I like to use a bit more on here are the canned chicken breast. Oftentimes, like if you're making like enchiladas or any type of dish that are mixing things into it, the canned chicken breast can be a really nice choice just to utilize. And again, you can take it out of your pantry. You don't have to think about having to cook up chicken all the time. So I always tell clients, don't write off the food just because it comes in a can or it might come in an aisle that's in more the intersection of the store. We just need to be a bit more choosy when we're buying those food products. And then protein bars, another hot topic that I often get questions regarding. And my big takeaway from this slide is I don't want you to live off of protein bars. So they're a convenience food item that if you're just in a pinch and you don't have time, or if you're just like, oh, I'm really hungry and I'm trying to take the edge off before my next meal, that might be where these come in. Or if you're traveling and you're like, God, I need something that's shelf stable, another good time to maybe push into the mix. So these are just some of the better ones on the market at this time. But I know somebody listening is going to be like, he doesn't have this one up there and it's a better one. I'm sorry, I could only fit so many on the slide. So I know that there's other ones out there. These are just more of the ones you can find in more common grocery stores at this time. So some of the better ones, again, are like the Go Macro bar. That's more of a plant-based one, and you can find that at most stores. The RX bar is another nice option, very short ingredient list on it. You have to like dates though. It is made from dates. So if you like that date texture, that one's a pretty decent bar to go to. Built bars are a nice option. The Perfect bars are the Ready Clean bars. Those are becoming more popular as well. And some of these bars you do have to find in the refrigerated section, like the Perfect bar, that always comes refrigerated. It's a peanut butter based bar. So again, less ingredients because it's more refrigerated and it doesn't have as many preservatives to it overall. But at the end of the day, really from the bar aspect, keep it to no more than one a day and then use them again as you need them, just on those occasions where you don't have time or it's just more convenient to grab something like this rather than something else in that moment. And you can make your own at home too. There are homemade recipes that you could utilize. Getting into the carb section now, the most probably hot topic of the area. What have you heard about carbs just in general? What are some things you might hear about carbs as you're going through your day-to-day life or scrolling on your phone?
That is bad.
Yeah, I feel like that's a pretty common summary of what we hear is that there's a lot of negativity around that. Unfortunately, it's similar to the protein aspect. There's so many different types of carbs that we can't group them all into one and say that these are great and these are not so great. So the premium carbs are the ones that are going to be more from whole food carbs in nature or more fibrous carbs in nature. So think of like sweet potatoes, red potatoes, whole potatoes in general would fall into this category. Brown rices, wild rices, quinoa would also fall into here. Your fruits and vegetables would also be considered a premium carb because there are some carbs in fruits and veggies, but they definitely fall on the more premium side of the equation. Hot cereals, which we brought up already, certain crackers. So think of more like the Triscuits crackers or the Mary Gone crackers. That's another funny brand that's out there, but they're more whole food based. Again, not as much white flour and things utilized in those products. So when we are choosing our carb rich foods, these would be the things like 80 to 90% of the time that we want to be trying to grab when we're choosing carbs. And beans, I can't leave that one off either. So beans and lentils would also be part of this category. So if your carbs at your meals are consisting more of these food items, you're likely gonna stay more full after the meal and maybe have less food cravings. Because oftentimes when people pull all the carbs out of their meal plan, they tend to get more food cravings from my experience. So by keeping some of these in the mix, you might kind of tone down some of that from happening. However, I put serving sizes next to these. So I have to always say, like, any food can be overconsumed. So when we're talking about even the premium carbs, at a mealtime, a couple servings a meal would be kind of in the ballpark for where we're looking. So that'd be like a couple slices of bread or like a cup. So a cup is about your fist closed. So like a cup of potatoes or like a medium baked potato would kind of fall into that. Or the sad one that I always get sad about is the cup of noodles. That's not a whole lot of noodles. So take that with a grain of salt. I'm sure some of us can get away with doing 2 cups at a mealtime, especially if we're active. But if we're not as active, probably a cup is going to be more in the ballpark. But we can always bulk that noodle up with other food items to make it look like it's bigger. So maybe throwing some protein into it, maybe adding some veggie noodles into it after they're cooked, just to kind of bulk it up and to make our brain feel like we're getting a bit more of the regular noodles. So I do like to bring up portioning because that's sometimes where I think the messaging gets missed, is that we encourage people to eat this type of food, but we forget to tell them that there's still a portion guideline that we want to try to think about around it. And I've fallen into that too, even in my younger time. So easy additions for premium carbs, these would be, again, those more grab items that might be easy to throw into our meal plan. So we brought up some of the breads earlier. So like the Dave's Killer bread or some of the sprouted grain breads could be a nice option to kind of keep in the mix. Sourdough even, I brought that one up before as well. Could be something to keep in. Grain pouches. So if, again, maybe if you had that rotisserie chicken and you're trying to get home and make something, maybe that's where you take a grain pouch and put that as a side dish with it, just to help kind of balance it out a bit more. And like the Seeds of Change, they make really good grain pouches, and any grain pouch that's unflavored or unseasoned is probably going to be a pretty good option. And then you can season it up yourself at home. That way you avoid some of the extra salt and things that they might be putting in at the factory. Other things on here, canned beans. I definitely think that's one of the healthier foods in that intersection of the store. And they're quick. You can take canned beans and add them into like ground meat. Like say if you're making tacos, that's one great way to add some canned beans into your kind of meal plan. Lentils, if you have those around, you can actually make like sloppy joes out of those. So lentil sloppy joe is pretty popular. And you can always add some meat in too if you're trying to kind of get your family used to having some beans into the mix. Other ones up here, the Kodiak pancakes or waffles. How many of you have had those before? They're nice. They're a nice happy medium. So for those of us who like pancakes or waffles, it can be a way to get some protein in and still feel like, hey, we can have pancakes on our meal plan and not feel like it's a taboo food at that point. I know we often make those in the muffins at our house and use them as a quick breakfast on occasion. And then for those of us who are like, Lee, well, I'm still going to eat lower carb. I don't care what you say about those premium carbs. And that's okay. That's the beauty of nutrition, is there's no one right way. So that's where this slide might help you out, where you can say, okay, I am trying to eat lower carb. Well, we can now start taking some of our higher carb foods, especially the ones that might not have as much nutrition to them, and swapping them over to things that are lower carb in general. So for instance, I would start with your drinks. So if you're somebody who drinks a lot of your carbs through like beverages, I would start there and try to do more like the sparkling waters, hint waters, just your own even flavored water with fruit that's in the mix, or even cucumbers like infused into it. That would probably be the best starting point. From there, I usually would transition probably more to like the snackier foods, so like chips, trying to go more towards like maybe popcorn as a high fiber snack. Not everyone's going to agree with this one, but there are some higher quality pork rinds that are lower in, again, low carb, they're higher in protein, and they're baked, so they're not always fried. So you would want to watch and buy more of the baked pork rinds if you're going to try that swap overall. Other ones up here that I tend to kind of gravitate towards as well are gonna be more of the bread items. So they do make a lot of low carb wraps in this day and age, so you could experiment there. Or even going to a thin sliced bread versus the regular slice. So like Dave's Killer Bread, I don't work for them, so I'm sorry I keep bringing the name up. But I don't have any investment in any food company, but they make thin sliced versions, which can be that happy medium. If you're like, yeah, I still want bread, but I don't want to have overabundance, do the thin sliced. It can still be a great way to have some in your meal plan. So I'm just hoping you can take this slide and have a few different swaps that you can trial out to see what might help make one of your meals in a day, maybe a little bit lower carb if you're trying to go that route. Or if you have blood sugar issues, some of these swaps might help to bring that blood sugar down a bit. Yeah.
So for whole fruit, is grapes, low carb or high carb fruit?
So that's a great question. So, and I'll repeat it just in case they can't hear it.
Okay.
So the question was, are grapes a low carb or a high carb fruit? They're really kind of in the middle. The issue that becomes with grapes
The
is,
sugar.
no, is people can eat a lot of. Because they're kind of like nature's candy. People can pop, like, you can kind of lose track. Like I've had people eat a whole bag of grapes and your stomach will feel it at some point, but people can eat a large volume of that. So my main encouragement is that they're kind of in the middle as long as we keep it to around 15 grapes a sitting, which is like a more of a medium-sized bowl. So they're not a high carb. It's just if you eat a whole bag, then yes, they become high carb after that. For fruit in general, berries do have the lower carb side because they're more fibrous. So those are your lowest end of the spectrum are berries of any type. And then the rest of them kind of fall in the middle for the most part. And juice is where we'd want to try to swap that more to the whole fruits to get rid of some of that kind of concentrated sugar load. That's a great question. Any other questions when it comes to kind of lower carb swaps at all? The yogurts, just as I saw that one up there, that's another section of the store that has grown tremendously in the last decade. Like it's amazing how many yogurts there are on the market. My main encouragement there is to turn the label around to see how much added sugar is in that product. And now every label has to have how much added sugar they put in. So my encouragement is when you're looking at foods, look for ones that are under 10 grams of added sugar per serving for like a yogurt type product. And that's where the Greek yogurts tend to be a little bit better. They definitely have a lower sugar content on average, but you still would want to take a glimpse at it to see how much added sugar is in this food. The total sugar isn't something to worry as much about. It's more the added sugar on that label that you're trying to focus in on. And then produce. How many of us think we get enough produce on a day-to-day basis? Fruits and veggies. It's a tough one, honestly, because one, they take time to prep usually. They spoil, which is a sad part as well. So, I mean, if you put them, I call them in the garbage can, which is the drawer in the bottom of your fridge, they might never come out until they're ready to go in the garbage. So my encouragement is don't put them in there unless you're used to eating them often. This is where that activation energy, we might need to put them up on the top of the fridge so that we act on it more frequently and make it easier to act on it. And my encouragement too is to buy things that are easier to work with. So if you're somebody who just doesn't eat a lot of produce in general, buy things that are pre-cut for a while. That way you get in the habit of like, oh, I don't have to do at least the cutting of it. All I have to do is eat it. That takes a lot of that activation energy down, which is a good thing. So again, don't be afraid to buy some of the pre-cut, even if it's $1 or so more. If you're not throwing it away, you're probably going to break even at the end of a month because you're not throwing so much away. Or maybe buy things that are more easy to prep, like the cutie oranges, those are easier to peel, or apples, you just have to wash them and eat them. So don't be afraid to go to things that don't take a lot of prep work. The frozen like veggie bags that you can just steam, that can be a nice throw in with a meal that needs to be quick and easy at night. And then the frozen fruit, we brought that one up already, but that's a nice way to even put into smoothies or to mix it into oatmeal. So I always encourage clients, think about what's going to help you act on it more when it comes to fruits and veggies, and just keep those around the house a lot more frequently. And for those of us who throw out a lot of food because it spoils, that might be the time to transition to a bit more frozen stuff for a while, just until you get in the habit of eating it more consistently, or buying the more shelf stable like oranges, apples. Bananas probably wouldn't be your best friend because they are not very shelf stable. So if you eat those quickly, go for it. But if they're the ones that turn brown and you end up throwing them away all the time, maybe switch to a different fruit for a while and then go back to them as you feel like you're ready to. And then this would be my biggest encouragement. People are afraid to use flavor enhancers when it comes to produce. So salad dressings and dips, don't be afraid to use these. It might actually be a way to help you push more produce into your meal plan. And there's a lot on the market now that are pretty health promoting in terms of dressing. So any of the yogurt based salad dressings that are either pre-made or that you can make at home, those are usually going to be a good swap. The hummus cups or guac cups, that can be another good way to go to help make things more appealing. The big ticket item though for guac or hummus, you will either want to buy the quarter cup single serving cups or take a quarter cup and put it into that so you at least know how much you're having. It's really easy to overeat on hummus and guac because it tastes good for the ones who like it. And sometimes it's easier to get more of that than the veggie coming in. And I speak from experience, so don't think I'm pointing any fingers. I just know that some of these tips can help when you're trying to add flavor enhancers without overdoing it. So some of the dressings I have up here, like Bolthouse and OPA, they make some yogurt dressings. These are usually going to be found in the refrigerated section of the store. And so that's a good thing, meaning that there's probably less preservatives added to those. So anything that's more refrigerated for dressings, probably a better choice for the most part. Or if you're making your own homemade dressing from, again, yogurt, probably a better choice just in general. Or you could make your own hummus, which I have a recipe coming up here in a second. But just showing you how these food swaps can really add up in a positive way. So if we take our traditional dressing, my favorite actually, ranch. So a serving of ranch, which is very sad, it's only 2 tablespoons. That's already about 140 calories just from 2 tablespoons, which most of us don't use just 2 tablespoons when we're doing salads or whatever it might be. But if you swap that over to the yogurt style, which it still has a lot of flavor, I will be honest, it doesn't taste that far off from regular ranch. It's only 30 calories per 2 tablespoons. So even if you over consume it, you'll still be under probably the calorie mark than if you were using the regular stuff. So at the end, even if you did a swap 2 tablespoons or 2 tablespoons, you'd save about 100 calories from your meal or snack at that time. So this can really add up over time, especially if you're an everyday ranch user, maybe like myself. This can really make quite a big difference by the end of a month. Classic hummus. So how many of you have made hummus before? Yeah, it's really not too difficult. So as long as you either have a food processor or a blender at home, it's really quick and easy actually to make it. And it'll last at least for a week or so in the fridge at minimum. And usually people end up eating it faster because it tastes so good. So again, you could use this with veggies. You could use it with a higher quality cracker or maybe a higher quality pita chip. Or a sandwich spread. That's another way that we like to use the hummus, is just to make sandwiches taste a little bit different by spreading it on. So this would be something that if you like to make more of your stuff at home, definitely try the classic hummus recipe out. I think you'd be surprised at how good it tastes, even compared to some of the store brand ones that you can obtain. And then just bleeding into more of the condiments, since they are a big area that we tend to eat from on a daily basis, for some of us at least. These are some of the fun condiments that might be something to check out as you're shopping. So if you really like barbecue sauce, G. Hughes makes a great line of lower sugar sauces. So again, if you just need something that's more pre-made and you're like, I'm trying to find that balance, the G. Hughes line, I've had many clients really enjoy that product in general. Or if you like to make like pulled chicken or something as meal, or pulled pork, that can be a great way to keep it on a healthier spin. I mentioned the Bolthouse yogurt dressings already. How many of us like to do any like stir-fry type dishes at all? Yeah, that's one of my favorites. And it's a great way to get some, again, extra produce in. Coconut aminos. How many of you have played around at all with those in the past? Yeah.
It tastes the same.
They taste very similar.
Yeah.
I will say everyone's taste buds for a while, it's going to take a few weeks to adjust to a new food. So know that right out of the start, you might say like, yeah, this tastes like it, but it's not quite the same taste. It's because your taste buds have to adjust, just with anything. So the coconut aminos definitely have the same flavor as soy sauce, but not as salty. So that's where your taste buds are going to need an adjustment, period. But that's the beauty of it. It has a lot less salt than soy sauce. So if you're trying to maybe cut your blood pressure down or maybe get off blood pressure medications at some point, that might be a swap to trial out to see if you can get some of the soy sauce down in your meal plan. Frank's Red Hot buffalo sauce. it's just a way to add flavor into dishes, and there's not a lot of calories in that product. It does have some salt, so just be aware of that. But it's just a way to maybe make chicken a little bit more flavorful. Or if you're even, I sometimes sprinkle it over veggies just to give them something, a little bit more pep to them. Because we all need flavor from time to time. Everything bagel seasoning, I'm sure a lot of us have utilized that. And really, it can go on everything. I can't, fruit, maybe not fruit, but it can go on anything but fruit, I would say. And so, I mean, whether you put it on toast or if you sprinkle it over, I've had it on oatmeal before. It really can add some different flavors into foods. Into grains, I know I put it into there as well, like rice and things like that. And for those who are really looking for like an array of seasonings, Flavor Gods, they make anything from more the sweet side to the savory side of things. Costco, I guess, is going to eventually start picking up those products, but right now you have to order most of them online for the Flavor God brands. But if you end up liking some of them, I do think they're worthwhile. And they're lower in salt, they're low sugar, so they're just one of those happy mediums that if you're really looking for an array of seasonings, I usually encourage my clients to at least look at them online. And I brought up kimchi already. So as a way to get some fermented food in, maybe using kimchi as a topping. Some people put it on the salads. I put it on the eggs. You can put it in the grain dip, like you make grain bowls, you can throw it into there as a flavor. So it's just a nice way to get some fermented food and to add some extra flavor into your dishes, especially if you like a spicier type of flavor. But that's enough with condiments now. Hopefully we have a few to pick and choose from. We'll transition now to the last kind of food group is healthy fats. So the big kind of takeaway from this slide is that fats are a positive thing for the body. So we do need some healthy fat in our meal plan, but we want to make it again more whole foods in nature. So nuts and seeds, which we brought up already, can kind of fulfill the void here. Avocados, which we just brought up. Hummus could also fall into here because olive oil is in that. So olive oil would be one of the better oils to be kind of either making things with or maybe doing light cooking with. Avocado oil holds up better to cooking. So if you're going to cook at high heat, avocado oil might be the way to kind of go in that route. Other things to consider to add on to meals, hemp seeds or chia seeds can be good to sprinkle in. So like just a tablespoon sprinkled into either like a smoothie or oatmeal or yogurt can just be a way to kind of up the healthy fats in that meal. And the fiber that comes with those seeds might be a way to keep us full longer after the meal. Chia pudding could be another thing you could utilize to kind of get some healthy fats and fiber and to make like a healthy homemade dessert type of dish out of it. So my takeaway from this slide is most meal times it's good to have a healthy fat kind of incorporated because it likely will make you stay more full. And it might even make you feel more satisfied, like, okay, I had some fat. That tends to make the brain feel just a little bit more like, oh, I had a good amount of food at this meal time. Now getting into actually like meal ideas to kind of just get some ideas generated overall. So high protein breakfast options. So a lot of times in our country, we tend to start off with really low protein breakfast options. So if you think of like breakfast cereal and like the Quick Trip muffins, sorry, Quick Trip, I know I'm not going to be sponsored by you in the future. But we often start with really low protein items, honestly. So we want to try to flip that around. We actually want to make breakfast the higher protein meal because we find that helps our hunger than the rest of the day. It really does tone down those hunger hormones a bit if we get the protein in earlier on. So whether that's like a yogurt parfait that you're making at home, you could do overnight oatmeal. How many of you have done that before? Those can be fun to experiment with. You can heat it up if you like it more warm in the morning, or you can just grab it cold. I know I prefer it cold, but teach their own with that. And then smoothies, I know it's not the best time of the year for smoothies, but some people still consume them this time of year. The coffee smoothie has probably been one of the most popular ones that I've kind of brought up or had a recipe for. So it's basically you take some coffee that you brewed up ahead of time, pour it into the blender, put like a scoop of vanilla protein in, some ice cubes. You could throw a banana in too, that kind of blends pretty well with coffee. And that can just be like your meal / coffee on the go, but you're getting that protein kick to it. I've had other clients even just take the bottled protein drinks and add them into their coffee as a way to make it more of a flavored coffee, but without having to do like the Starbucks or some of the foo-foo coffees that I mentioned earlier. Other options, which we do this on occasion, are making like homemade breakfast burritos. So I know the knock on breakfast burritos in the store is that they're salty. They usually have more of the fun meats in them, so they're usually not as lean in nature. There's a few brands that have done better with them, but it's probably best to make a lot of this stuff at home if you can. So really all you do is kind of take a pan, kind of start making like scrambled eggs in a pan and kind of you can add some lean meat in if you want to. You can add some peppers in. That's what we often do. And just kind of make up that filling for the burrito. And then once it cools down, that's when you would start to fill your burrito shells in. And you can use the higher quality shells, whether you want to use low carb ones or whole grain versions. And then you would wrap them up. Again, the key here, if you're gonna freeze them, you want to make sure that filling is cooled before you wrap them up, or else it gets too much moisture inside the wrap. So you want to make sure that everything's cooled down. You put the mixture into the wrap, roll it up, and then either you can use some like wrapper, like mind blanking, like freezer wrap you could use to wrap them up. Some people use tin foil. I guess whatever you have that's more convenient. And then as you pull them out, you'd put them on a plate, wrap them in a paper towel that has a little bit of moisture, like a dampened paper towel, and then microwave them for about 1.5 to 2 minutes, and that'll reheat it. Let it cool a little bit because it could be scorching hot on the inside. So I don't want any lawsuits after tonight because Lee told me I had to make these breakfast burritos and I scorched my mouth. But know that these are nice because they'll freeze for at least several months. So if you make a batch up and then you're like, hey, now I don't have to make a whole bunch of stuff every single day, it's a great way to make some things ahead or do some marathon cooking or marathon prepping. Has anyone done that before? Made breakfast burritos ahead? Yeah, it's one of those things that it can become a habit, but it can be a habit that you fall out of. So it's just trying to figure out, okay, how do we make it a habit more consistently? Or maybe again, maybe we do it a certain, like, hey, once a month we do it, if we like them enough. Others transitioning now more to lunch options. So this can be another kind of wild card because a lot of people eat out for lunch now because either they forget to grab something or they just didn't prep ahead on what to bring with. So I often encourage first, maybe utilize leftovers for lunch. Just that way things aren't going to waste at home. Like stir fries, as I brought up earlier, that can always be a good leftover to eat the next day even. Burrito bowls can be kind of nice to throw together even for lunch because you can then take like leftovers from different meals and kind of put them together. Another one I like are just like large salads. So making it, again, a decent salad, but throwing maybe some extra chopped vegetables on top. If you like to do eggs on top or even like maybe tofu, you can get like the pre-marinated tofu and chop that up on top to see if you like that. Edamame can go really good on top of a salad for that protein kick. So these are just, again, some simple ideas that you could run with for lunches instead of always having to grab from like a fast food or more of a pre-made option. Bento boxes. So these are things that have definitely become more popular, which it's just a fancy name for an adult Lunchable. So again, let's call it what it is. It's an adult Lunchable. It's fun though. I will say for some reason, when you put it in a box like that, it's much more eye appealing. And it probably brings us back to a kid when our parents would buy us Lunchables. Like, oh yeah, this feels normal again. So I know for myself and my daughter especially, if you have any, I'm not a picky eater, but my daughter is a little bit more selective, I like to call it. I find that bento boxes are nice because it gives them enough of each food item that doesn't overwhelm them. And it gives them a variety, which a lot of times selective eaters or picky eaters, they like variety at a meal and they like things not to touch. So that's where these bento boxes help separate things out. And you can still like pair up. You can put a protein source in, you can put a vegetable or fruit in, and then maybe some type of healthy fat as well into the mix or some type of premium carb, as we mentioned earlier. So the takeaway here is that you want at least a protein source, a piece of produce of some type, whether it's a fruit or vegetable, and then you can kind of pick or choose if you want some healthy fat or more premium carbs in your bento box. And there's really no one right bento box. If you go online and type in bento box, you're going to get 1,000 hits. So you're never going to run out of ideas. It's more about putting them together though ahead of time. So you can usually do 2 or 3 ahead, and that way you don't have to do it every single night. So maybe take a Sunday, make 3 ahead for Monday through Wednesday, and then on Wednesday, make the next ahead for the end of the week. And they do make fancy boxes you can get on Amazon that are called bento boxes. So if it helps you kind of engage in the goal a bit more, so be it. I know that everyone has their driver. And then fun supper meals. How many of you struggle to come up with just like new supper ideas or things that are gonna keep it interesting for family? Yeah, it's easy to get into a rut for supper. So these are just some of the fun ones that we throw into the mix. I encourage my clients to use like a meal spinner, like whether you go online and you type in like different meal options into a spinner and just let it spin and say, this is what we're having for this week. And you don't have to have a new meal for each night, because I encourage, try to use the leftovers if you can. So you might need to pick out 2 or 3 recipes for the week, but use that spinner to kind of even pick out what type of cuisine you might want to try to find, or again, if there's a certain protein you want to try to utilize more through a week. I think it can be fun, especially for if you have kids. The spinner definitely helps get them involved. These are kind of more meals that have helped too on more of the kid-friendly side. Breakfast for dinner is a winner. I don't care. I know my dad would probably, he would walk out of the room right now, but I'm a big fan of breakfast for dinner, and I think that's where like the protein pancakes can come in handy, whether you make them yourself or use the Kodiak products. You could even use those breakfast burritos for a dinner meal. Gyros, so those can be a nice, fun, easy option. You can get the pita bread. And then if you have like leftover chicken breast, you can use that, or if you just were making chicken breast that night, you can use that for it. What's nice, what you can do with those pita breads as well is make homemade pizzas on them, which that's a win, because oftentimes pizza is kind of like a taboo food for some reason. But if you're making it yourself at home, it can have a lot of nutrition to it. And especially if you make it more like personal pans, it's easier maybe not to overeat on it than if you don't have like a full 14-inch pizza in front of you at that time. Skillet fajitas, so I'm a big fan of skillet meals. That way you don't have as much cleanup. So you just kind of throw everything in a skillet. That kind of is your main part of the meal. Yeah, you might have a side dish of some type, but your main meal is going to be in that skillet. And there's, again, so many recipes online for those skillet types of options. And this, it's kind of a spin-off. That would be sheet pan meals. That's another really easy, kind of put everything on a sheet pan, chop it to similar size. That way it cooks more evenly. And it's a really quick and easy cleanup. And you can even put the sheet pan together the night ahead and then just throw it in the oven the night that you're gonna bake it. Loaded potato bar, so trying to get some potatoes maybe back in our meal plan, but more in the whole form. This is another winner. So just baking up a whole bunch of potatoes and then having different types of things to add on top of it. So maybe you have some like lean ground meat that you're gonna have people put on. Beans would be another good addition on top. Greek yogurt, plain Greek yogurt, not vanilla, plain Greek yogurt would be the way to go. That could add some extra protein. So we're trying to balance that potato out with some protein on it. But they're filling. I will say if you do loaded potato bars for meals, your kids likely are not gonna ask for seconds because they are very filling at the end. And then last but not least, that I mentioned that sheet pan fajitas, that they do make a nice chicken sausage that's a leaner product that you can use to kind of make that more of a fun meal too. If you have anyone who, again, is maybe more not used to vegetables yet, but if you throw them with protein, it makes them a little bit more easy to accept it. And fueling on the go. How many of us have to sometimes eat on the run or stop and swing through a drive-through on occasion? This is probably, I would say, unless you like don't have a lot of activities going on, it's hard not to have to do this from time to time. So the big ticket item though is like a lot of companies have listened to the consumer and they're trying to offer at least 1 or 2 healthier options at each restaurant. I know post-COVID, things kind of got a little out of whack. Like there's less, I would say some fast food have kind of gone away from some of this, but there's still some that are still really about trying to offer healthier choices. So big thing here would be when you're ordering any type of sandwich, definitely go to the non-breaded products as much as possible. So like the grilled chicken sandwich over the breaded chicken sandwich. And yeah, it's okay once in a while to have the breaded chicken sandwich. I mentioned earlier, I really like breaded chicken. So yes, I do have breaded chicken sandwiches from time to time. So I don't want anyone to see me in Culver's and be like, he told me there was no breaded chicken sandwiches allowed. So yes, you can definitely have them on occasion, but most often try to swap it out. Burrito bowls, as I've brought up a few times, definitely anytime you can get it in a bowl form, probably going to be a little bit leaner than if it's coming in a big wrap or something like that. Other choices, soups can sometimes be a better choice too when we're out to eat. Especially if you do like a soup salad type combination. Subs can be pretty good as well. especially if you're doing a sub that has, if you can get more veggies loaded on top and sticking more to the leaner meats on top of it, or even doing a veggie sub on occasion, if you're not opposed to that. So those can definitely still be a step in the right direction. I'm not gonna bring up salads, because I think that gets overplayed a lot when it comes to eating out, but if you like salads, yeah, there's still plenty of those options out there. But you need to watch the dressing and what types of products they're putting on top. So if it's a salad loaded with bacon and all this stuff, it might not be as healthy as you think it is. So you just need to watch what toppings are going on and then how much dressing we're putting on top of it at the end.
Question.
Yeah, so,
In regards to the amount of, bread. The subs seem to be a lot of bread, but
yeah, thankfully now a lot of sub companies have gone to like that medium, like 6 to 7 inch sub, which is probably more appropriate. Like think of like a Jimmy John sub. It's kind of more in that ballpark versus a foot long sub. The foot longs definitely at one meal is too much, unless again, you're a high level athlete, eat the foot long sub and don't worry about it. But if you're somebody like me that has a desk job, probably the 6 to 7 inch sub is gonna be a more of an ideal portion there. And even there, some clients will say, well, I only eat the bottom bun. I take the top off and eat it open faced. And that's okay. There's nothing wrong with doing that. So if you're somebody who's just like, yeah, maybe I'm not moving as much as I used to, then we don't need as much bread or as many carbs as like, say, if we're really active every day. But I don't want that to get spun as Lee saying that carbs are bad. It's more about how active we are and then what our day looks like as a whole in general. So by all means, if I even know Subway now has gone, they call them protein bowls. It's just a salad with the protein on top of it. So kudos to Subway for changing up their marketing to make it look like it's something different. It's a salad with protein on it. Sorry, Subway, I know I'm not gonna be sponsored by you either. But by all means, I do think that even if you can gravitate towards some of the things listed up here, especially like the side options, that's where people get thrown off. Because like a fry can have just as much calories as a sandwich. So even if you can swap the fries out to something else when you're eating out, or even just skip the side and just do the sandwich, that can make a big difference long term. While not having to feel like you have to give up all the LT food items. And then the drink would be the other big one. Oftentimes when my clients come in and they're like, I have to eat out for work this many times per week, we just start focusing on, can we swap the side and can we swap the drink? And if we can do that, we're pretty golden, even if they have to eat out most days out of the week. Their budget's not gonna be golden, but their food option will be better than, again, if we're doing a lot of the sides or a lot of the drinks. Recipe sites, so for those of you who just are like, okay, where can I get more healthier recipe options? You can't go wrong with anyone listed up on this slide, in all honesty. Skinny Taste has a lot of good family type of recipes that it basically is in the name. It takes like traditional recipes and makes them healthier. But family friendly as well. Other ones up here, Clean and Delicious has a lot of great options. For those of us who want to do more meal prepping or kind of like at least knowing what our meals are going to look like week to week, Meal Lime is a free app that you can utilize to kind of plan out your meals and it'll save them. So if you find recipes you like, it'll save them in your account and then you can just pull them in as you want throughout the month. So that's probably one of the best apps out there for meal planning at least, and it builds shopping lists in it as well. So I'm hoping that these will at least be a reference point to where you can say, okay, these are some recipes I can go out and look at, and they're all quality based. So if you're just like, okay, I don't know if like some of these Pinterest recipes or things like that are great. These are kind of more tried and true recipe sites that I feel pretty confident with. And they all have a section geared towards if you're trying to eat lower carb, vegetarian. So I do like that aspect as well, that you can go and pick and choose the recipes based on the cuisine or the type of meal plan you're trying to follow. Last but not least, we have to talk about desserts and snacking. So how many of us like to do desserts after a meal? Yeah, I fall into the camp of I like to have a dessert here and there. So a lot of it might just be coming down to, hey, can we make some desserts at home, or can we have things that are kind of like a fake dessert in a way, meaning that it kind of takes that craving away, but it's more of a really nutrient rich food item. So some things that we could consider, if you need something more pre-made, there are some like products now, like Halo Top makes some ice cream bars and things of that nature that are a little bit more higher quality and lower in sugar. Does anyone have a Ninja Creamy Maker? the ice cream maker that Ninja has come out with. That's a really cool product because you can make ice cream out of like Greek yogurt, you can make it out of protein drinks. So if you're somebody who really likes ice cream, I love ice cream, it's worth the investment. If you eat ice cream like once a month, don't bother, save your money. Come over to my house, we'll make some together. But if you make it, if you like ice cream a lot, I would invest in one just because it is a way to make your ice cream at home and it lowers the sugar content tremendously. And it still tastes good. So I mean, they have some really nice recipes that you can follow. Other things to consider, frozen bananas, they actually make these in the freezer section. They're chocolate covered bananas that come on a stick. Some of you have probably had them before. They're just a nice way to get some fruit in and to make it more like a dessert. So kids, that's a fun way for kids. Again, I know even as a family, we tend to eat a lot of them. I think sometimes we eat them before my daughter does, which I'm sad to admit that, but it happens. Black bean brownies, how many of you have made those before? No? So somebody's face, they're like, meh. It's honestly, they're super simple. So all you have to do is take your favorite brownie mix. So just go to the store, pick out whatever favorite brownie mix there is there. I usually recommend picking a brownie mix that has chocolate chips in it. That way, in case any of the black bean doesn't get fully pureed, people don't realize that, hey, what is this piece in here? It usually gets all pureed, but again, it can happen. So if you take a can of black beans, rinse them off, and so get them in a colander, rinse them off really well. Put them in a blender or food processor and add a cup of water. And then you just blend them until they're pureed. So you don't see any more black beans floating around. You take that liquid, it looks very yummy, and then you pour it onto the brownie mix and you mix it together. And then it looks yummy after you mix it together. Put that into your brownie pan and bake it like the directions say to bake it. And when it comes out, you're gonna be surprised. You won't notice that there's black beans in it.
It doesn't taste like a brownie with beans.
No, not at all. It tastes exactly like the store mix. The one thing I'm gonna warn everyone, so everyone listen up who's listening on the slides. You cannot eat a whole pan of them in one sitting. You will get an upset stomach because of the extra fiber. It adds a ton of fiber and extra protein into it. So again, yeah, you can eat a couple at a sitting. But if you're somebody who's like, this has black beans in it, I should eat a lot of it at a sitting. Don't rethink that. It's more of a 1 or 2 serving item and then move on to the next day. But I will say it's a good way to get some beans into your children if they're just opposed to eating them other ways. So I know it's not everyone's favorite, but it is a quick way to get some in. Dessert hummus, which I have a recipe coming up for. How many of you have tried that before? I know it sounds strange. It's like beans and a dessert again? What the heck? It does taste really good and you can use it to dip fruit into it. So it's a nice way to get some extra produce in and that fiber from the beans as well. And last but not least, energy bites, which maybe this is more individual styles in here. Those are
That
fun.
is good.
Yeah, those you can make up. You can put chocolate chips in them. You could use the Lily's chocolate chips, which is a lower sugar chip if you wanted to. And yeah, I mean, I think adults like those, kids tend to like them. You can make them from dates even to make them even sweeter. So they're just a fun thing that you could make up, keep in the freezer and pull out as you need them. The dessert hummus though, again, if you try this, you'll be impressed on, it does not taste like beans. So it's more of a chocolate base that you can get. You can buy this in the store too. They do make dessert hummus in the store. And I would, again, dip some either fruit into it. I know my kid likes to dip like graham crackers into it. Hey, they're still having a healthier dessert than a lot of other items. So there's no perfection here. But it's super simple. As long as you have a food processor or a blender to make it, I think you'd be pleasantly surprised. And then the kind of the snack sheet or snack attack, I call it. Basically, this slide is just again helping give us a list on, okay, what are some healthier things I could keep around the house from the different sections of the store. So on the more pantry side, the big ticket items in that area are gonna be more of like nut and seed pouches, dry roasted beans like chickpeas or edamame. Those are like, again, if you haven't tried those before, I would definitely give them a try. They come flavored if you need them a little bit seasoned. That's it bars. They're just like dried fruit bars. Those can be a nice choice to kind of throw into the mix. Big bars are still a good option in my opinion. Granola bars, whether it's like more the Nature Valley or the Make Good bars, those are another great option. Kind bars would also fall into there. again, it's like pretzels and things like that could also kind of be thrown into the mix depending on how you're using them. So there's really no bad option. These are just some of the better choices out of the bunch. If you're trying to get a variety in that's a little bit more nutrient rich. More on the fridge side of things, that's where maybe more like the string cheese, the yogurts, hard boiled eggs, you can either buy them or make them yourself at home. Cottage cheese cups, drinkable yogurt. So that's gonna be things to maybe stock the fridge with a bit more often. And of course, fruits and veggies too would fall into here. And then last but not least for the freezer, this might be more of that frozen fruit section. Wyman's makes a cup that has fruit and yogurt bites in it, which are pretty neat for like a snack option. We already mentioned like the frozen bananas that are dipped. And then like the frozen waffles, so like Kodiak makes some frozen waffles, Kashi makes some frozen waffles, which can be a better choice. And last but not least, the veggies make great muffins. They're just muffins made with some veggies added to them, which kids tend to like because they're chocolate flavored or they have a blueberry flavor. So again, we're trying to find that happy medium between things that are quick grab items, but still have nutrition added to them. And of course, you could make some of this stuff at home, and I encourage you to do that. This is more for those times where you didn't have time to make it, but you still want to keep healthier options available. Because we all have weeks like that. And for those of us who like crunchy snacks, these would be some of the things maybe to trial out. Like if you're trying to swap from the chips over to something a little bit more nutrient rich, these would be the way to go. So the dried bean snacks, you could even do Bonitos. They're a bean-based chip. As you can see, I like beans in my meal plan. And there's something that I think if more people could add into their meal plan, you would see health benefits over time from it. Catalina Crunch is just like a lower carb snack mix. It's a company that makes low carb cereal and low carb snacks. So if you are trying to go that route, you could try to look into that company a bit more. They do make Oreos as well. I'm not going to say they're a health food, but they have them out there in case you need that fix from time to time. And then high protein snacks, as I mentioned that, hey, if we can keep some protein trickling in through the day, you're likely going to feel better by at the next meal. So some of the fun ones listed here are like the avocado boats. Has anyone ever done that before, where you core out the avocado and kind of fill it either with, you can put tuna inside of it. I had some people put like egg, like egg salad mixed into it. That one's a little different. I prefer the tuna aspect, or even canned chicken could even go well with that. So the loaded tuna boats or the avocado boats can be a fun option. Hard-boiled eggs can be another good quick grab. Cottage cheese bowls can be another fun one. You can throw a little bit of granola on top. I know cottage cheese is a hard sell because of the texture, but if you do like it, it's a really high protein snack. Yeah,
How do you feel about granola?
it's fine as long as it's the sidekick and not the star of the show. Because granola is, it's a more of an energy dense food, so it should be more of a sprinkle on and not like the granola is the main dish. It's more of that side option. And there are plenty now out there, like Bare Naked makes a low sugar granola. Kind makes a decent granola. There are even low carb granolas out there. So there's definitely products out there, but they all come down to their energy dense that you want to use as a sprinkle on. But they add texture, which is nice.
Mhm.
And that's again where you could even use like nuts and seeds texture into something like that. Other snacks, probably another one of my favorites that are listed here are basically the wrap roll up. So you put some peanut butter on a wrap, roll up a banana into it, and that can be kind of a fun snack option. Or you could use any type of fruit. You could use like a lower, like a Neufchâtel cream cheese, which is like third the fat. That can be fun to roll up and put like strawberries in. So yeah, just some different spin-offs of the roll up types of snacks. Making a homemade trail mix and adding in maybe some popcorn to give it some volume. Because sometimes with trail mix, it's hard because if you're just eating nuts and seeds, the portion is so small that it doesn't feel satisfying. So if you add some popcorn in, it kind of gives it some volume to make it feel like you have more food there. Crispy fruit, how many of you have seen the freeze-dried fruit before? It's called crispy fruit, that's the name brand. But those are sometimes nice to throw into a trail mix too, just to give another texture. And if you like the dried fruit that's in some cold cereals, it's kind of similar to that because those are freeze-dried as well. Last but not least, I have to bring it up, veggies and dip. You can't go wrong with that, especially if you're using one of the condiments that we mentioned today. So you're never going to go wrong if you're having produce as a snack. And it's okay to use the flavor enhancers. To wrap up tonight, I thought it still would be wise to touch on beverages. So for hydration, a lot of times we aren't consuming enough fluid on a day-to-day basis. So usually in a day, we want at least half our body weight in fluid per day. And for a lot of us, that's probably going to aim from anywhere like 70 to 90 ounces a day for fluid. The one question I often get is like, what if I'm trying to lose weight and I'm like starting at this weight and trying to get down? Use your goal weight for your fluid intake. So take whatever your goal weight is and half that. That would be a good starting point for fluid. Because you can get too much fluid. So once you're getting over like a gallon a day, there might be some risk of getting muscle cramps and just honestly dehydrating yourself from electrolytes. So flushing out too many electrolytes with that. So just know if you watch your urine color, that's why I have these glasses up here. You want your urine to be pale yellow to clear, kind of bouncing back and forth. If it's always clear, you're doing well. So you don't need to push more fluid. So kind of bouncing back and forth between pale yellow and clear would be ideal. If you're always apple juice color, that's where I get more worried, like, okay, my urine is too concentrated. I need to get some extra fluid coming in. And that's where maybe we chain this habit up to our meals. Maybe every time we have a meal, we have to take down at least a thing of water with it, just to help get that fluid coming in more consistently. I like how everyone has a bottle in here tonight. So if you can carry a bottle, that usually helps you get more of the fluid in as well. But I still encourage my clients to chain it up to something because it's easy to take the bottle with you and for it to come home with the same amount of fluid in it. I think we've all done that before. So just know that fluids are important. And if you exercise, you want to get at least like 16 ounces of fluid in about an hour before. It'll help your heart work easier during the exercise because your heart works off that volume. So if you're dehydrated, your heart has to work harder to get the blood out of it. And then beverage swaps, because we mentioned here that, hey, there's some swaps that we could do on the liquid side of things that might help kind of bring down extra sugar in our diet. They'll help get our fluids up so we're drinking enough. But maybe we need some actual flavor enhancers in it. So True Lemon is a product that you can utilize to add like flavoring into your drink. They also make just crystallized lime or lemon products that all it is the crystallized lime. You pour it in, it has a really mild flavor overall. So if you're trying to get away from some of the more artificial stuff, those crystallized lime or lemon packets might be the route to try, or just squeezing in lemon or lime into your drink. Good Earth tea, so that any tea, honestly, as long as it's more of like stuff you're brewing yourself, those would all be good things to maybe consider to get more flavor in. And there's also antioxidants in tea that help maybe keep us healthier long term. I mentioned already earlier some of the flavored waters, so like the hint waters or like the bubbly or the carbonated waters, those could definitely be thrown into the mix. And then bubbler, so if you need that energy drink, that might be the more natural route to go for that, is that bubbler type of product. Zevia would be a soda alternative, just in case if you're trying to get off some of the diet sodas and going to something maybe a little bit more natural. So by all means, water is still the number one beverage, but it's okay to have variety just for keeping ourselves sane from time to time. So practical takeaways then from tonight. Number one, anything you're doing for the lifestyle side of things comes down to building habits. So as we mentioned, try to make sure that you're building your habits based off a smaller gap. So try to pick things that are more achievable to start with, and then build it out from there. Try to chain up those habits to other habits you already have so that it's more easier to kind of create those habits over time. And then watch your food patterns. Really, that's what your health dials down to your food patterns when it comes to the nutrition side. So it's okay to have fun foods spread throughout the month or week, as long as your main food pattern is a lot of whole foods, a lot of more nutrient-rich foods, so fruits and veggies, your lean cuts of meat, your premium carbs. If that's a bulk of your diet, you have a lot more wiggle room for some of the fun foods in the mix, versus individuals who have more fun foods and less of those nutrient-rich foods in the mix throughout a week. And then remember to incorporate those high protein foods throughout the course of the day, and don't just have like one high protein meal at night. Try to spread it through the day, because it really does seem to be better for a fullness factor through the day. And then by nighttime, we might not feel that over hunger kind of as we roll into dinner time, or that ravenous hunger that we sometimes will get. Last but not least, I encourage my clients to think about the small swaps and how they compound on each other. So how small the swap is, it all is dictated by how consistent you can do it. So again, the smallest swap can make a huge change if you do it consistently, and it adds up over that month to year that you're doing it. So my encouragement is don't ever overlook something small, because if you start doing that consistently, it could lead to another habit change down the line. And any just questions or takeaways tonight? Yeah,
So regarding your diet, can you talk more about like what the timing of when we eat and does that matter? Like some people do intermittent fasting.
Yeah.
Some people don't eat past a certain time. Like, does that really matter? Or we just eat when we're hungry? Like
That's a-
listen to our body?
good question. And there's gonna be a ton of viewpoints on this, and there's still a lot of research that needs to be played out.
Yeah.
Currently, the evidence shows that for the average individual, and the key word there is average individual, non-athlete, so somebody who's just, again, maybe works out once in a while, but lives a pretty normal lifestyle, we probably want to tone our eating down as we get closer to the night hours. So there seems to be maybe like a 7-8 o'clock timeframe where we want to really maybe tone our eating back, because our biological clocks are built off the light cycle. And by 7 or 8 o'clock, on average, that's when the light is going down. So there is evidence supporting that maybe 7 or 8 o'clock might be a good shutdown time to say after this, we transition to just fluid, not a ton of fluid, or else you'll be up during the night. And then maybe try to have a fast of at least 10 hours overnight until you eat your breakfast. That seems to be the evidence that's most highly supported at this time. I know oftentimes for intermittent fasting, there's a 16-hour fast that's often touted, or even 24 hours. There's nothing wrong with that. However, some people do not hold up well to 16 or 24-hour fast. And it seems the female population is more sensitive to those longer fasts. So it might even be more ideal for them to do the more 10 to 12 hours versus the 16-hour, just for realistic sake and long-term, like just overall feeling of wellness. So my main encouragement on that side of the spectrum is that it is probably wise to kind of tone down eating by 7 or 8 o'clock at night. You'll sleep better. Honestly, I've never had a client come back in and say, I slept worse after I cut my eating back at night. Most people's sleep cycle is highly disrupted by eating really close to bed. So I think that alone could be a benefit, just not eating so close and you're getting a better sleep. And then possibly there is some benefits to just having a little bit longer food gap in between that overnight hour. When you brought up then, is it like, do we need to eat at certain hours during the day? There's a lot of debate to that. The one thing I would bring up with that is that it is probably wise to have some meals spread through the day versus eating just one meal a day. In the fact that people who tend to eat just one meal a day tend to overeat heavily at that meal. So I would tend to spread it out. That way too, you get your nutrients in, because I can guarantee no one's eating all their fruits and veggies at one meal. It's just not feasibly possible, like volume wise. So that's where I get concerned. Like, yeah, these fasting diets sound great. I've yet to see anyone be able to hit all of their nutrients at that one meal, because the fiber would just fill you up so much. So that's where I think you do need to spread your produce at least out through the day. So that way you're getting those nutrients in and not trying to shove it into just one meal.
I'm gonna have a question.
Yeah.
Okay, this is about working out. What do you recommend eating before we work out? Or should we eat anything at all before workout?
And really that's highly dictated by like how intense the workout is gonna be. If it's something like that's more moderate, that you're like, this isn't gonna press me too much. If you feel better working on an empty stomach, I would have you roll with that and just eat shortly after finishing, just to get some fuel back in. And if you had a meal within like 3 or 4 hours, that's your pre-workout right there for most of us. If it's a really intense workout, it probably is wise to have something like an hour or two ahead. And that could be anything from like, again, there's no one right answer here, but you do want some carbs usually at that time. So I've had some clients just go to like rice cakes with a little bit of peanut butter on it. You could do like a homemade yogurt parfait, as long as you hold up to dairy okay before workouts. That's actually too where if you really like breakfast cereal, before a workout would be a time to do it. So if there's any time you want to add breakfast cereal in, by all means do it before your workout, because your body will use that fuel pretty efficiently. And you don't have to feel like, oh yeah, that actually went towards my hard workout at that point. But if you already ate like a meal within 3 or 4 hours, you don't have to jam another meal beforehand. And I've had some even do it like my workout falls around my lunch, let's say. And some of them will do half their lunch before and half of it after. So they'll just split the meal on 2 and kind of do half and half, just so that way they're not having to feel like they're adding a whole other meal into the day. But usually things that sit really easy in your stomach, and usually carbs are gonna be that go-to before a workout for the most part. Fruit can sometimes work well too, like bananas, and more skinless fruit would be a better choice beforehand.
If you eat closer than 1 to 2 hours beforehand, then while you're working out, it doesn't know if you're working it off the food or working on your body.
No, that's not it at all. Your body is a super complex system. Like, it just takes whatever's coming in and says what needs it the most at this point, and it diverts it towards that. So if it's your working muscle tissue, it's gonna take that fuel and divert it to that. The only reason I say an hour or two before is for stomach's sake. Cause some of us, if you're jostling your stomach around and you have food content, some people do fine with it. They can eat right away before a workout and they just go, and it's like, didn't phase them. If you have any sensitivity in your stomach though, it can cause some irritation and make you feel either nauseated during or cause diarrhea during. Two things that no one ever wants to have during a workout, or just even make you feel like a stomach, kind of like, oh, I got a sore stomach at this point because I'm working out with a full stomach. So that's why I usually generally say at least an hour or two ahead, try to push it out.
Okay,
Yeah,
to piggyback up on that, after you're done working out, do you think that us normal people who just work out, like not high intense, like not bodybuilding?
Yeah.
like, do we need to eat protein after like 30-minute window like that?
there's no window.
Okay, no window?
The window is been eliminated. And the reason why there's no window is because your body, when you eat protein, it puts it into this big pool for the body to pull from through the day. And that's like a 24-hour pool. So as long as you had some protein spread through the day, there's always gonna be protein for it to pull from. So there was once a thought that you had to space your protein, and it's still good, in my opinion, it's still good to space it just for feasibility's sake, because it's hard to eat 100 grams of protein in one meal.
Mhm.
So it's good to space it for that aspect, but you don't need to eat it at a certain time after a workout. There is still, I hear a lot of still the mindset of within a couple hours get something in, and that's probably not a bad mindset to have, because by then, if you miss it after a couple hours, you've probably missed a full meal for the day, depending on when it falls. So I still think, again, if you're gonna eat anything after workout, protein would be ideal, because that's what your body is gonna eventually look for, some protein, but there's no magic window. And that's a beauty of it, though. It doesn't mean like, oh, I wasted my workout now that I didn't get it in within 30 minutes. Whether you get it in 30 minutes or 2 hours, it's about the same effect overall. So I still would get protein in. So you brought up, I didn't really answer your question. For the average individual working out, if it's like a full workout and if it falls like, again, close to a meal time, I would have a protein meal sometime after that workout. Absolutely.
What about protein shakes?
And that's, I would either use those in the aspect of if you just don't have time to make a meal consistently, you could always throw it in there and say, this is gonna be part of one of my meals for the day. And that's okay, in my opinion. Or if you're somebody who, yeah, I did have an intense workout, use it after your workout. Your body is gonna utilize it well. And it might help you recover a little bit faster for the next day too.
Do you feel like Premier Protein is a good brand for protein shakes? So there's like things on the internet that said, oh, it's not a good brand because of what's in it. Some people say, oh, it's fun because of the high protein content with the.
Yeah, I mean, with all those things, the reason why they get knocked, in my opinion, is because in the Premier Protein, it does have artificial sugar in it. So that right there, you're gonna have a camp of people right there that are gonna say it's terrible. It's all about the dose, honestly. So as I brought up, I'm okay with clients doing like one of those a day. Do I want you doing 6 of them a day? No. So that's one area where people get kind of down on it. So I would say, just looking at it as a product as a whole, I think it's a-okay if people are using one of those a day. I have no concerns long-term that would have any negative effects on health. However, if you're somebody who doesn't like the artificial sweeteners, there are the Orgain products, which they don't have artificial, they use stevia in their products. Evolve is another one that's more plant-based. So some of the plant-based ones have gone away to doing more non-artificial sweeteners. But Fairlife is kind of similar to the Premier. It has a very similar profile. It just tastes a bit better than the Premier in a lot of people's opinions.
Okay.
So I mean, they're a quick, convenient source of protein. And as long as you're using them the way they were created, as either like, again, a substitute for maybe a quick meal that you couldn't get in, or a after workout kind of protein boost. I think they can be beneficial for both. Any other questions at all? I'm gonna see if there's any questions on here too, really quick.
There's no questions.
No, no question. Is anyone listening on the video chat, any questions at all? Feel free to unmute your mics if you have any questions. Sound like any questions on that end? Any other last minute?
Great, anonymous ask.
Yeah. No, I like questions. That's why I like to leave time at the end, because there are a lot of hot topics, and at the end of the day, again, if most of your foods are coming from like whole foods in nature, you have wiggle room for some of these more man-made items in the mix, because unfortunately, and this is coming from a dietitian, your health isn't just made from nutrition. It's a piece of the puzzle. Sleep is probably just as big as nutrition, in all honesty, as I look at it research-wise. Sleep is probably right next to it, and then also movement, mental health. So there's so many other pieces of the puzzle that you don't want to fixate just on one of them, because then it takes your mind off the other ones that also make a big difference. So again, you could do your best to eat more nutrient-rich foods, and that's great. But know that there's, again, a spectrum of things we need to be watching if we're trying to optimize our health. So this is just one of those pieces of the puzzle. And yeah, I appreciate everyone listening tonight, and feel free to reach out if you have any questions afterwards. Email or call me. I'm definitely always open to that. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for coming. Yeah, I'm gonna stop that right now.